I'll demand that interest rates drop immediately, and likewise, they should be dropping all over the world.
President Trump takes a swipe at the Federal Reserve. Let's talk to Michael Landsberg of Landsberg Bennett Private Wealth Management. And I'm Lisa Bernhard with Reuters. Okay, Michael, we had President Trump today beamed in to Davos at the World Economic Forum, and he said there that he'll demand that interest rates drop immediately. Now, the Federal Reserve has its policy meeting next week. It is supposed to keep, or it's expected to keep rates unchanged and perhaps lower rates twice at the most this year. So what do you make of President Trump's salvo?
Yes, I think I think there's an overwhelming disconnect between what President Trump wants and what the Fed's going to do. As a real estate guy, he wants rates to go lower. I think the Fed has kind of boxed itself into a corner. I think inflation's going higher. It's gone higher the last 3 months. I think it goes higher the next 6 months. I don't really think they're going to even get 2 cuts in this year. I think they're going to get 0 cuts in. So I think there's going to be a disconnect between what the president wants, which obviously is lower rates. He thinks that's going to grow the economy. And the flip side of that, if they lower rates too aggressively, inflation's going to come back really aggressively. And so I think they're kind of in a catch-22. I expect the Fed to sit on their hands and just kind of deal with some of the rhetoric that's going to be out there.
Trump, in his speech today, also threatened tariffs on EU nations, goods coming in from EU nations. How do you see that potentially weakening those economies or sparking a trade war? How do you see that playing out and what the ramifications would be?
I think the first play for Trump is I think it's undeniable that the United States shoulders much of the expense of everything in the world. I think Trump has kind of campaigned on that. I think he goes back to that, whether it be NATO, Ukraine, et cetera. I think this is just more of let's get people to the table to talk about how unfair all the rest of the world's problems are on the United States and our economy. So I don't necessarily know if we go through that at this point. I mean, Europe's in worse shape than we are. So I think economically, tariffs are going to not help them for certain. But I'm not sure if we get those. Obviously, tariffs, there's some trade-offs with currencies. But I think this is really more of an opening move to get people back to the table to talk about let's look at dividing some of these expenses more fairly. I think we saw that with him pulling out of the World Health Organization, the Paris Climate again. I think he looks at things and says, "Hey, we're paying more than our fair share. Why should we?" And I think this is just a continuation of that speech.
So when he talks about 25% tariffs on imported goods from Canada and Mexico, say, you sort of are still taking that with a grain of salt at this point?
Yes, I think part of that with those two neighbors, I think it's got more to do with immigration. Is hey, you guys need to help us out a little bit. Immigration at the U.S. border starts at Canada and starts at Mexico to make sure it doesn't get there. And I think that's basically what the idea is. We certainly don't want to have tariffs, but let's sit down at the table and talk about what you're going to do to stop the immigration flow. We're trying to take care of our borders, but if you don't do anything on your end, it's not going to really help us that much. I think that's really the case in point is I think he's using these tariffs as a way to get people back to the table to deal with some things that he thinks are unfair. Whether we get tariffs or not from Canada, Mexico, I certainly don't think we're going to get 25%. Maybe there's a little bit, but I think it's more of a matter of getting them to the table to talk about how they can help us stop the flow of illegal immigration into the United States.
And also from that Davos speech today from Trump, he said that he would ask Saudi Arabia and OPEC to bring down the cost of oil, and crude oil futures fell after he said that. He also blamed them for the Ukraine-Russia war, said that war would come to an end if oil prices came down. How do you see oil prices now playing out?
Yeah, he was quite busy at Davos. I think when I look at the price of oil, I mean, oil I think is a little bit higher than probably it would need to be. I think what ends up happening is if we go to the idea of drill, baby, drill, you're going to have more producers in the United States drilling. It should drive the cost of oil down. I'm not sure if Saudi Arabia and the rest of the Middle East is going to just drop the price of oil because Trump said they need to drop the price of oil. I think that is, again, maybe a negotiating tactic on his behalf. But we think inflation is going to go higher. If it stays here at the 78, 79 barrel oil per barrel, I think that's going to be a problem for our inflation numbers. I think our numbers are too low. So I think it behooves him to try to get the price of oil to come back down towards the normal, let's say $72, $70 range. It has been for the past 6 months. I think that would actually help the inflation story and not have it get as rampant as we think it's going to get. But I think him asking for it, I think it's fair. I think part of the idea is he's going to do things that he believes his predecessor should have done and didn't do. And it might be a little bit of window dressing, but it doesn't hurt to ask. and he's trying to shift some of the blame to them, which I think allows him to have a better position with Putin, saying basically this was started by external forces. I think he does have a good relationship with Putin, and I think he wants to keep that. It's certainly, as a country, we hope he can keep a good relationship with him. But I think at the end of the day, he's been consistent about getting rid of the war. I mean, ending this war. And if he can blame some other folks for it to get them to help and kind of carrying the weight here, I think he does that.